Welcome to Inside the Hive on the All Hornets podcast network. One podcast feed with multiple shows, making sure we cover the Charlotte Hornets from every single angle. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. The All Hornets podcast network is affiliated with the Fans First Sports podcast group. Today's show, me and Chase are going to be discussing a little bit about LaMelo Ball. There was some interesting posts on X over the weekend, which we're going to dive into a little bit more. And we're going to try and actually have a intelligent, educated discussion, because apparently we should know this by now. X is just not the place to try and have that. So we're going to do that on here on the podcast as well. Then we're going to be talking about who we think after 10 games or 11 games, who we think is in the Charlotte Hornets core moving forward, and what do we think the core needs to add in the future. So that is today's show. Chase, how you doing?
This is very similar to last week, James. I feel like we both were like, as people, we are doing well. As a Hornets fan and Hornets viewer, member of the Hornets community, we are among the most downtrodden groups of sports fans in North American professional sports right now. So myself, I'm doing well, but it just has not stopped. The rain is still coming down on us, even after the last week of basketball since our last episode.
The only franchise maybe more tortured in American pro sports, the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, pretty much.
At least the Charlotte Hornets have their pick this year if they finish in the lottery. I mean, imagine if they traded an unprotected first and were as bad as they are so far. I mean, the world would be falling. Not that this year's draft, by the way, if you haven't looked already, this is not the draft you want to be finishing in the top 4 or 5 from everything that I've read and heard so far. So, the only difference I will say to last week, Chase, last week I was doing good. This week I'm not. When you have a baby, there's all these things like these things you hear, these buzzwords, and like I don't have any apps. I try and ignore like there's too much technology, too many people with opinions. Like I just try and block it all out. People had warned me about something called the 4-month sleep regression. It is definitely a thing. Like as soon as Theo hit 4 months, he is now like up all the time. And you may have noticed I've not been live doing games as much this past week because me and my wife have been just struggling to keep him. And anytime we can get sleep, we're trying to. So I've still been catching up the games. Normally when I've been getting up at 4 a.m. is when I've been watching them. So a little bit of a stranger time zone for me. Normally people are still up the night before when I'm tweeting about the games in the morning, which is an interesting thing that I've not had to encounter.
I was going to say the game can't be ending too much earlier than you're waking up, like Eastern time compared to where you are. It's got to be ending at like what, 2 a.m.
A couple of hours. It's a couple of hours, like an hour and a half till I'm getting up at the minute. So I'm still watching the games. I don't want people to think that I've like quiet quit on the Charlotte Hornets if you don't see me tweeting. It's just look, the struggle is very, very real right now. So if you've had kids, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, I wish you best of luck whenever that happens. So I'm struggling. You might have to carry me a little bit this week. My energy levels are down, and the Charlotte Hornets play, like you alluded to earlier, is not doing anything to pick me up. But I'm happy your main Celtics got some wins over the weekend. So at least one of our basketball teams is winning here. And the Greens for Swarm got a win. Go Swarm. So happy for them. Amari Bailey had a really good second half in that game. So that was good to see.
I'm sure I speak for myself and all of our listeners when we say that we absolve you for any sluggishness that you may be feeling right now of waking up at 4 a.m. and then going through a 34-point loss to the Milwaukee Bucks was probably not the most energizing activity. So
no,
I can't blame you at all.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to start today's podcast with an educated discussion on LaMelo Ball. And the reason we're doing this is we've heaped a ton of praise about LaMelo Ball recently, right? And he continues to be on an absolute heater. Like his stats have not dropped off at all since we last spoke. This is still the best offensive stretch in his career. But after the games of the weekend, there was a couple of posts. One from Matt Moore from Hardwood Paroxysm, and I'll read it here. LaMelo Ball has 5 games with 30-plus points this season already. That's really good. They've been outscored by 68 points in his minutes in those games. I'm not suggesting he needs to score less, but I'm not ignoring that his supporting cast is subpar. But I've seen a lot of 30-10 games, and I would say they were not impactful. The numbers matter. They help. But your game should help your team in the best possible way to not get killed in your minutes. So Matt Moore was tweeting that. He's been a pretty consistent critic of LaMelo Ball back to his player rankings that he released in the summer. I think he was in the 80s, I want to say. Spencer Percy, also of Buzzbeat Radio, talked about, and I'll read his. LaMelo Ball just continues to make baffling, non-winning basketball plays in real situations. I understand his counting stats are starting to look better, but man, there's something that's required from a winning player that I just don't see. So I thought those tweets made for a good discussion topic because, and we're going to talk about this in as delicately as we can possible. I understand what Matt and Spencer are tapping into, right? I think they're completely going way too far with their analysis. Non-winning players getting killed in your, that's all like, for me, that's too far. But if you're talking about LaMelo Ball at times when you watch him play in these games, make some really strange decisions which you don't normally get from like your best player. And, there's some decisions that have negative repercussions on your teams. He has moments of those. And we're going to talk about this in detail because I've got a lot of thoughts on this. But I think how they're trying to put that across is just like way too far. It's like they're trying, maybe they're trying to get engagement. I don't know. But what are your thoughts? I mean, I shared these tweets with you and I said I wanted to discuss them. What are your thoughts on those posts?
So I think I'm essentially like in lockstep with your opinion. They're definitely not wrong in certain aspects. Like we have all seen the frustration fouls or somewhat careless turnovers or lack of effort or energy and engagement on defense, like slow rotations, whatever you want to call it, and pick out as like a, what a quote unquote winning play is typically defined as or considered. Those have all happened. Like LaMelo has done all of those things. It slowly has been cleaning them up since his rookie year, but especially early on, that was a very frequent occurrence. The only thing is that like, it's not just him. The high majority of the players on the roster do similar things, maybe not as in the same way that he does, because he's a point guard and is a smaller, quicker player, and there are a lot of bigger, less athletic guys than him. But there's very little like accountability defensively on this entire team right now, and really has been that way since he was drafted. Like even the James Borrego teams, that was their biggest struggle, was there was very, very little chemistry defensively. Nobody was really like all that active or aggressive or physical. They had to play zone because they just couldn't get stops in really any other way consistently. Like this is a very consistent theme among the players that have been on this team, which it did seem like it was turning around that way. Like they had the number 6 defense over a very large sample size last season, but it's clear that like maybe that was not necessarily a fluke, but like a lot of those players that were a part of that defense are not playing here right now or in the role that they were playing last year. And clearly it's just fallen off of a cliff and is back to what it was before. Like,
and we all know, team stat basketball post trade deadline,
right,
is always like you have to take whatever happens with a grain of salt. There's been a lot of teams that have tricked themselves into thinking that they were something which they weren't, because that time of year, it's like long into the season. A lot of teams have got injuries. Like a lot of teams are already thinking about the playoffs, next steps. Don't tell me why, because it shouldn't when it comes to a long season. But there's just a lot of times, and look, we were guilty of it as well. We talked about that top-ranked defense. You thought there'd be carryover. If anything, they were going to have more players back, more time in Steve Clifford coach system, younger players who got older. You think there's only going to go up. And like you say, it's been complete regression. So we were guilty of that too. And I think you're absolutely right when you say, like, look, there are some moments you can point to, and we'll get to them, where you can say, LaMelo, what are you thinking there? I will say it is like issue 29 on like most pressing issues for the Charlotte Hornets team right now. I understand LaMelo Ball is the best player on the team, so he's just going to catch more analysis than everyone else, because like who's going to engage with Matt Moore if he's tweeting about, I don't know, JT Thor's poor defensive closeouts? It's just not going to happen. So he's going to get he's going to catch a lot of stick, just like LeBron caught a lot of stick, right? When he was whenever he plays, because he is who he is. He's the face of the team. LaMelo Ball is not the reason this team is playing poorly. If you want to point to the record and say this team is not a winning team because LaMelo Ball's play, you are just not watching the games closely enough. Yes, there are things that he could be doing better, but there is a whole host of issues way ahead of LaMelo Ball, who is offensively keeping this team from I don't know where they would be offensively without LaMelo Ball. Like, you can argue that, if it wasn't for this, and we're going on to it would be like when they're down 8, they could have cut it to 5 if LaMelo had done this. That's great. If it wasn't for LaMelo before that, they would have been down 25 points, right? So you can critique and down the stretch or in key moments when he makes poor decisions, but the team wouldn't be anywhere close in most of these games if it wasn't for LaMelo Ball up to that point. So I feel like both sides are ignoring, he makes such incredible plays and his mistakes are so awful. He's a high variance player. He is a roller coaster of a player. And I get that, behind the back transition, behind the back pass, just intercepted by Dante DiVincenzo. You're going, what? That's just careless, reckless. That's the kind of thing that Matt Moore, Spencer Percy are pointing at. That's not something that Michael Jordan, LeBron does. They're not about the flair. They're about, we want to get these 2 points because that's all that matters. But equally, you have to look at the rest of the game, and he makes the right plays a lot of the time outside of that. So I feel like both sides are kind of then you've got all the LaMelo fans who just look around and say, what is this guy supposed to do with the rest of his team? And everyone was saying, this is the most talented Hornets team that there has been probably in a long time. So it's not let's not sit around here play like he's playing with the 2012 Charlotte Bobcats here. This is not a talentless roster. So I feel like both sides, there needs to be some understanding that there is a middle ground here, that he has taken some incredible steps getting to the rim, scoring at the rim. His 3-point shot he's shooting the hell off the ball right now. He's taken some really positive steps, but there are still some flaws there, and we can't just discount the steps he's taken or the flaws that remain.
Exactly. And the thing with this is for the plus minus measurement part of it is, like you said, with LaMelo can make this sort of mistake or make this play, and it would have cut what was a 7-point lead deficit into 5, and then you can go from there with this much time left. That plus minus plays directly off of that type of making those types of plays and small incremental runs over time. That doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things for a team like the Charlotte Hornets. They are consistently losing games in all but one of the seasons that LaMelo has played. Nobody really is going to build an overly positive plus minus over an extended period of time on a team that's losing games that consistently. It's a very difficult thing to do. Back when the Hornets were originally rebuilding, Devontae Graham was a very high plus minus player. He was one of the highest in the league, I believe. It was 95th percentile that year he broke out with the Hornets. Obviously, Devontae Graham is not one of the most impactful on-off players in the league. It was just that the Hornets really only played well offensively when he was on the court. Now, you could say that that's exactly why LaMelo's numbers are like that, and that, they don't play well offensively even though he's putting up numbers. But they don't play well offensively regardless. There's nobody on the Hornets right now that has an offensive plus minus that is over 6.5 points other than Gordon Hayward. And Terry Rozier has a 6.4 offensive plus minus in the 75th percentile, but he's played 170 minutes this season at the beginning of the year when they actually weren't that bad offensively.
Against the easy schedule. Exactly. As well. LaMelo Ball has now played some of these 2 New York games, the Milwaukee game. We're recording this on Monday evening before the Boston game, so we haven't had the outcome of that yet. But absolutely. Who really references plus minus this day and age? That is just cherry picking a stat that suits your argument, right?
Right. Because all of his other advanced stats are some of the best in his career right now. I don't know if you've looked his BPM, his box plus minus this season is the second best in his career behind only his All-Star season. His win shares are the third best, last in his career right now. The third best in his career is double that. But guess what? The other years where his win shares were higher were when the team was actually winning games. These like certain stats play directly into like the on-court results and like how many points your team is scoring and winning and losing by. And like the ones that don't and just account for like his individual production and his play, like those represent him in a positive light. Like every single, advanced stat really is going to be able to portray a player one way or another, depending on how you argue that point. But when you encompass all of them together, like LaMelo is not necessarily like having the best year of his career numbers wise, but it's certainly not the worst. And like, I think that is very obvious that the play of the team on court, not necessarily the talent, because like you said, this is probably the most talented team he's played with. And I think I still would probably agree with that.
I would agree.
But the on-court chemistry and the habits, I think this is the biggest thing. The habits that these players have built playing off of LaMelo, both offensively and defensively, are very like poor and not conducive to helping him play, because there's nobody that's like, LaMelo's going to be a average defender or whatever. There's nobody behind him that's like some high above average defender. They just got like 2 rim protectors last season, and now over the last couple of weeks, like this has probably been one of the poorer stretches of Mark Williams' career defensively. So there's just very little like insulation for him to have these types of like advanced stat like on-off numbers, like win shares, VORP, whatever you want to do. Like all of these things that are all encompassing are going to be very hard to have like showing you in a positive light when it's just the on-court product is just not good night in and night out. I don't think that's an individual's fault.
Yeah. And the Hornets are asking LaMelo Ball to do a lot right now. LaMelo Ball is 4th in the NBA in usage, 35.3%, career high. The other players ahead of him are Devin Booker, who's basically he's been playing high usage because Bradley Beal's been injured and other people have been down the lineup. Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic, and then he's tied with Giannis and above Trae Young. So we're talking like they are running everything through him. Now, this is partly because Terry Rozier's injury, right? That is, I think, hurt, like his usage has increased a little bit. But LaMelo, like you talk about those 4 players, Devin Booker, Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, are just much more complete offensive players. Maybe Giannis, you can argue not as much because he's effective in different ways. But Embiid, Doncic, Booker are like just offensive savants in terms of scoring in the half court, having every single move, every counter. That is what those guys do. LaMelo Ball is a great thing. He's a great shooter. We know he's got touch in the mid-range. But those are his strengths. Like he is nowhere near as advanced as those players offensively, but he's being put with that usage to try and produce like those players. And that's why you start seeing some of those, the ugly sides, because he's just being asked to do so much all the time. And they're all older. Those guys are all in like year 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. LaMelo Ball is still in his rookie contract. So they're more experienced. They're much older. They've grown into those roles. And LaMelo Ball has just been thrust in there pretty quickly with injuries around him to start the year, missing certain players. There's going to be bumps. And I feel like people don't appreciate that this is the first time he's ever playing like this heavy usage role, and he's learning as he tries to do that. Gordon Hayward, we talk about being that stabilizing force. That's what we talked about so often in the first 2 years. The word stabilizing kept getting used. And I do feel at times like I wish the offense, and I think this is a coaching thing. I don't think this is LaMelo waving off, the coaching. I think at times there is a little bit of LaMelo Ball dribbles around and everyone stands around waiting for him to do something. Like I checked the cutting numbers. The cutting on this team looks terrible. I actually checked the cutting numbers. They're not actually that bad though. This is what confuses me. If you look at the team stats, they're not that bad. But so many times LaMelo Ball, like he does that Steve Nash dribble into the basket, and everyone just stands there. Nobody cuts. So then you have this position where LaMelo Ball will dribble around for like 15, 18 seconds, and he'll just pull like a 3-point shot. And you go, well, he's just ball hogged there and he's just dribbled it out. Well, yes, but that's also because no one did anything. And he was like, well, I got to get a shot up. There's 8 seconds left in the shot clock. And I'm shooting whatever it is, 45% from 3. So I might as well take it. So those are the kind of things that like any statistic or even the film, if you don't pay attention, they're just not going to capture those kind of moments.
I'm so glad you brought that up because my next thing was going to say, like, I think a big part of this is that I don't want to phrase this so that it sounds like a negative thing, but like it's almost that he doesn't have like full trust in his teammates to create really anything because I mean, I'm sure he and everybody on the roster knows full well that he is by far the best playmaker that they have, the best ball handler, shooter, like outside threat. Like he is the engine of the offense and has been pretty much since halfway through his rookie season when they essentially gave him the keys to the franchise and benched Devontae Graham for him. With Terry Rozier out, Gordon Hayward and PJ Washington essentially get slid up into a role that is like one option on the offensive end higher than where they probably should be, which I think is probably what leads a little bit to that too, because PJ and Gordon, I think, are very good. And PJ especially is because he's paid like one, are very good as like third and fourth or fourth and fifth options. But when they're your second and third options and your first option knows, okay, Gordon is like a good late shot clock creator, but he's not going to just blow by his defenders anymore and kind of needs to get to his spots on the floor, on the court specifically, or have like an open catch and shoot attempt. And PJ is much more of like a spot up threat and drive off closeouts guy. And even though with the improvements he's made in the mid range the last couple of years, I really got to set these guys up. And it's got to be me that creates some sort of advantage, collapses the defense, engages their defender and pulls them away in some way to be able to get them an open shot. So when he does that and he doesn't like the look that he gets for them, which in his mind is like, okay, that's probably not a great shot for PJ. Even if it would be, he may look that off, take a shot for himself, do what you said, like dribble around the basket, which is a good thing that he has actually put that into his game, because I think in the past he would just pick up his dribble or turn it over or throw up some crazy layup or something. So I think it is good that he does that. But like you said, any sort of like cut or spot up attempt or roll
off
to the
ball
rim,
screens, someone roll off a curl, like
right,
as he comes underneath, everyone just stands around and
exactly,
watches.
because it's like, okay, LaMelo's going to create it, but it just it can't be that way.
Yeah. So I absolutely agree. He's not being put in a position like 35% usage is too high for LaMelo Ball.
Yeah.
That has to come down. Like that is code for we don't have anything else. And like teams just get used to, like, they know what's coming. Okay, it's going to be a pick and roll with LaMelo Ball and Mark Williams, and you get used to guarding it, and you get used to knowing exactly what LaMelo's strengths are, and you get to try offset it. The best teams where it's like, we've seen it with the Denver Nuggets, the Golden State Warriors, and those runs. Like, they've got great players, but everyone can hurt you, and everyone can make plays, and everyone's involved. And right now, I feel this team is too LaMelo Ball centric. And look, his stats are incredible. He's actually doing. If you told me he had this usage, I would have said, "Oh, it's going to be inefficient." And his efficiency after the start of the year, which we can't just forget about, but his efficiency has been excellent over like the last 6 or 7 games. But the best thing for this team and for LaMelo Ball is for the usage to come down. I'm curious, Chase, from what you've seen, big picture. Do you think LaMelo Ball is a number one option on a like top 6 team in either conference, or let's just go with Eastern Conference? Do you think like that is what LaMelo Ball is? He's your number one guy in the team, and you build around him, or do you think he profiles better in that number 2 role? The kind of like Devin Booker role, Darius Garland, Pascal Siakam, De'Aaron Fox off Sabonis, Damian Lillard, even at the time when he was like playing off LaMarcus Aldridge back in Portland. I'm trying to think of guards here. Do you think he is a better as like that 1B rather than being the 1A?
So I think for a top 6 team, I definitely think he's good enough to be that 1A, like best player on the team, 2-way leader, head of the snake type of thing. But I actually have thought over the last couple of weeks, I feel like if you're like a championship level team, I think it would be all right for him to be maybe not your like second best player, but at least like your second best scorer or shot creator or something like. And this is a much more extreme example, obviously, because the Hornets would be very lucky to ever have 2 players of this caliber on the team at the same time. But like, it's almost like Denver, where Jokic is easily their best player. Obviously, he's the best player on the planet right now. But you could make an argument that like Jamal Murray is their best, like end of shot clock, like late game, go get you a bucket, like one-on-one scorer. Like because he's quicker, he's maybe not necessarily better at anything like shooting, ball handling than Jokic is, but just in that specific scenario, like you can trust him equally, if not greater in sometimes than you can with Jokic, just to go score on someone when you need it. LaMelo doesn't really have that guy that's as good at that as him, and definitely not better, which I think it would be really interesting to see him with a player like that. They don't have to be a better player, but just somebody that can do that at an equal or greater level to him, I think would just be open up so much of his game at not only as like a passer, but just as an off-ball shooter. We've like forgotten how great of a shooter he is because no one can pass him the ball. Like no one can get an advantage to get him open. He's the only person that can get himself or anyone on the team open right now.
LaMelo Ball, if you think about his skill set, right? Incredible passer, struggles in the half court, incredible shooter. He is built to play off someone who draws a double team. Yes. Right. As soon as there's a double team, he will pick apart that offense, like that defense. If it's a 3-on-2 situation, if there is an open shot going from a double, LaMelo Ball is like the perfect guy to play off that. But what you probably don't want is like, imagine this playoff series where the pace of the game is slowed down, the defense is locked in. Like, I don't know right now if like that's the way for LaMelo Ball to be the best player on one of those top 6 teams. For me, he's like the perfect guy to play off. Now, to play off someone. How can you go find that? That's really hard, right? How many guys command doubles in the half court? You're probably talking around 10 to 15 guys in the entire league. So I'm not saying the Hornets need to just go out and get a guy who commands doubles because it is just not as simple as that. I think that would be the best situation for him. But for now, they're going to have to try and find a way to navigate it without that. And, you know, so far, he's done it with terrible spacing all around him. You know, think about all his increased attempts at the rim, and he's actually shooting at a like similar percentage as last year at the rim. And that's pretty impressive considering the poor 3-point shooting they've had this year. The fouls. I want to talk about the fouls. Israel posted IO handles on Twitter. Posted an interesting video of coming with like 8 clips from, I believe it was the Miami Heat game, looking at fouls from LaMelo Ball. Did you see that video at all, Chase?
I did watch that video, yes.
So I shared that video with an NBA scout, right, who I know, and I said, how many of these, you know, do you think would be fouls? Out of the 8, he said maybe 1. And there looked like to be a lot of flops going on, right? That's what he had no skin in the game, has nothing to do with the Charlotte Hornets, but he just told me like there was maybe 1. And I do think when it comes to getting fouled, like everyone thinks that Charlotte get a terrible whistle. And look, there's been moments to have, but every fan base thinks to get a terrible whistle. It's just the way it is. People are saying, oh, but like Jimmy Butler, he gets fouled 90% of the time. Jimmy Butler is like one of the most physical players. Every time he touches the ball, he is putting his like ass into you. Like he is pushing, he is initiating contact. LaMelo Ball like basically tries to stay away from contact the most of the time. There is just no way to compare like LaMelo Ball and Jimmy Butler, how they play. So then you can point to Trae Young, right? Well, Trae Young gets to the foul line a ton. That's true. But how Trae does it is a lot of the time through he sees like a defender who is moving either backwards or sideways and he dribbles into them knowing he'll get a blocking call, or someone will be like reaching him with an arm and he'll kind of like rip through and they'll draw a foul that way and get him into the bonus. And LaMelo doesn't really do that either. LaMelo kind of drives at the rim, tries to force contact. And I think at times you see it, he gets frustrated at like what's going on in the game. And then he just comes down the court and goes, I'm going to drive right to the lane and I'm just going to, launch myself into someone and I'm going to get a foul call. And I think the refs know when he's coming down the court, oh, LaMelo is going to do that thing now where he like goes over aggressive and tries to get a foul call. And he almost pursues the foul call so much that he gets distracted from what else is going on in the game. And then some of the times, because he's speaking to the ref, that does feed into the poor transition defense, which we know this team this year has been terrible at. So I think people have this real thing about LaMelo Ball not getting foul calls. And look, I agree every game there's probably 1 or 2 moments where they're right. There's also, I'd say, 3 or 4 moments where I think the call was absolutely right. And LaMelo Ball needs to get back on defense, needs to not worry about that, doesn't need to go searching for the contact as much, trying to draw those fouls, and just needs to focus on, his game and not get distracted with the referees. Because that seems to happen every night at the minute. He seems to get this battle with the officials, and I don't think that's helping him or his teammates in the grand scheme of things.
No, it's not at all. And the very first thing that popped into my mind is that play against Miami where he was dribbling up the side of the court. I think it was at the end of the third quarter, and he took a bump from, I think, Kyle Lowry and just fell down onto the ground and like slid
exactly
out of bounds. Immediately he rolled over and like threw his hands up at the ref, and it's like, yes, you took contact. Like, they did touch you. Basketball is a contact sport, so you are allowed to be touched by your defender while you are moving. You need to be able to withstand that contact and drive through them. If you're doing that on the way to the basket and you go through them and it affects your motion, that is a different story. If you're just dribbling up the court and someone like braces you with even the slightest bit of like physical defense and you fall over, not only are you not going to get a call there, you're not going to get them anywhere else either, because the refs are just going to be like, okay, this guy's whole thing is to just try to bait us into calls that aren't even actually like a scenario where you could get one. It's different when Trae Young or James Harden or Joel Embiid does it and gets a free throw from it. If you're just like dribbling up the court trying to get like a blocking foul at the end of the quarter for nothing, like it's just like refs just don't appreciate that stuff.
Even if you are fouled, if your goal of the play is to try and draw the foul, the referees are desperate not to call it.
Yeah,
because they know that you're making a non-basketball play. You're not making a movement, an honest movement to get to a spot on the floor. You're just trying to make them blow the whistle. And like, if I'm being honest, I'm glad referees don't blow that, because then everyone would be doing it. And we'd be in the situation where we were a few years ago, where Trae Young was getting like 15, 16 free throws a night, right? It's still not perfect, but I do think the level of officiating has actually got better over the last 3 or 4 years. We went too far the other way. And that's just one thing, that there are some moments every game I absolutely concede. You can point it and go, that was a clear foul. But I think there's probably more moments where he's searching for something which I don't think's there. Right, I want to get into some of these clips here, and I'm just going to share the screen here so you can all see it. I saw, again, shout out to Israel. I think he posted after some of the posts on X that if you're going to say LaMelo Ball is, if you're going to criticize him, can you at least provide some clips, some video, right? And break down the film of where these situations that people like Spencer Percy, Matt Moore are criticizing. So I went through, and I've been messaging about this with Israel, actually. I have some clips that I want to share. I'm hoping this works on the YouTube. I'm hoping it comes across. So bear with us if it doesn't. But if you want to go check yourself, you can actually check. If you go to the Milwaukee Bucks game, go to the play-by-play and go to the fourth quarter. And from around, I think it's about 10:51 to about 9:30. It is a basically just over a minute stretch. The Hornets currently are down. What are they down here? They're down 8 points at the start of this. And so this is still a game at this point. 8 points to start the first quarter. This is the first shot that I want to show you here. This is a LaMelo Ball missed pull-up jump shot. This is the kind of shot that Steve Clifford, I can tell you, will probably dislike, because there is limited ball movement and the ball goes up, I think, with 17 seconds on the shot clock. So I'm going to play it here for you to come down. So 20 seconds on the clock. Okay. Right. It was close to going in. And yes, they went under the screen. But this is the kind of thing, like a pull-up three early in the clock, try and get an easier shot than that. That's what the coaching staff would be saying. That, like, you can probably get a pull-up three at some point later in the shot clock if you want to go to that move. But to take it that early, and that's the kind of other thing, like, that's where you're big and everything like that. They run up the floor that little bit less hard because they can probably sense that shot is going to go up. This is another one. This is a couple of seconds later. This is a driving layup. And this was, again, one of these frustrated moments that I think. So forces it here into two defenders. Tough shot, blocked air ball. And not only that, it's a shot that Milwaukee are off on the fast break. Again, there was no passing in that whole entire possession. That is just a dribble it up over half court and drive, into the help defense. You're not even really beating your man. And that's a miss-up. So, possession later, LaMelo Ball comes back down. This is another driving layup attempt. Again, there is no ball movement here. If you watch again, as he comes down. Again, another possession, very limited ball movement. He's drove into the rim. I love that he's trying to get downhill and not settling. But again, you're talking about you've not put the defense under any stress in that situation. You've just come down. Like you've not moved them side to side. All these things that we see from the best offenses. We're going to see the Boston Celtics tonight. They do it all the time. You don't just have these like 1-on-5 or 1-on-0 just drives to the rim where people call their own number. So these are the type of plays. I've got one more. This is a turnover here that LaMelo Ball tries to manufacture an open shot out of a situation where he should just secure the ball and give it up. So you'll see that they show hard on the double here again, and this is just seconds later again, and he ends up turning the ball over. So at this minute, secure the ball. Tries to make the pass, which if it made the pass, it would have been a wide open three. I get that it would have been a good point, and you can argue you're chasing the game, whatever it is, down 12, I think it is at this point. But you've got to secure the ball. And the turnovers, which we haven't really talked about yet, are really up this year for LaMelo Ball. Now, the usage is sky high, and that's why these turnovers are there. But this team is not getting back in transition well, and a lot of these turnovers have been live ball turnovers from LaMelo Ball. So when people are talking about criticizing LaMelo Ball, these are the type of clips, and that was all in a minute 20 right there. And it went from being an 8-point game to after that, it was a 15-point game. And that is game over. And you could arguably say LaMelo Ball really hurt his team there in the fourth quarter. But as I mentioned earlier, you can't forget that the team would never have ever even been down 8 points had it not been for his play throughout the game. So then what do you do with that as an analyst? It's really hard. Okay, so you're great for large portions of the game, but you have these really kind of hard low points that hurt your team, and you let go of the rope. And I understand why that's been divisive amongst maybe like national media or analysts and fans, because when you look up and you look at all the incredible scoring plays he's done, and I'm not going to show those. I know people saying, balance it out with the good clips, the bad clips. You've all seen the shot making he's made, some of the finishes at the rim. You don't need me to do that. This is the kind of more subtle stuff that I want to point out on the podcast through video, because I think this is the stuff that maybe you don't notice as much, traditional fans. And that's what we're trying to do here, is trying to help educate people this nuance between LaMelo Ball being a not winning player to LaMelo Ball should be, whatever it is, an all-star this year. There is this middle ground, which is probably the realm where people, I think, should be talking about it.
And I completely agree. And especially with the hot stretch that he's on right now, the highlights are going to be everywhere, and rightfully so. Like, he has been incredible to start the year, or not to start the year, but since the start of the year when he was struggling, he has been absolutely incredible. Easily the best net player on the team, one of the best players in the entire league, if not maybe one of the best top point guard in the Eastern Conference right now. But where you have to find is that gray area in the middle during the game when there's, very little rhythm has been established, because he is, 8 for 12 and nobody else on the team has more than 5 points. And you just have to like put yourself in his shoes, where it's like, he has played so well. By the time the fourth quarter comes around, he's probably just like, you know what? Like, exactly. I have 28 points.
Yes, why not? You've nailed it. You can see it in his body language. You can see it in his body language. He's, and this is not from a place that I don't care. It's from a place that
he wants to win.
Yeah, and like, I've played well, and I think the only chance we've got is for me to try and do some of this stuff. Yeah, because like, I don't think it's like natural that he's going out there. He didn't really do this in his rookie year, because I didn't really feel like he needed to. But he's trying to force it now, because he can sense, if it's not me, the way they're playing us on defense, it has to be me. So I don't think this is something that he wants to do. It comes from a place of passion, from trying to work hard. It comes from a place of frustration at times, I think, when he's frustrated at the score and he wants to be winning games, and he's trying to force it. But sometimes as he tries to force it, it can be damaging. But that's not all his fault. There is massive contextual things we have to pay attention to. the one thing I will say, he isn't perfect, right? Tell me a player that isn't. But you can criticize him if you're Matt Moore and the hardwood paroxysm, or if you're Spencer Percy. What other option is there? What are you going to do? Go find a more talented player? Or actually, are you better to try work with a player who's got some of like top 15 talent in terms of just talent playing basketball in the league, and try to correct some of these shortcomings, try and educate him to help manage these situations better, try and put him in a better situation with surrounding cast? That's the only way out here, Hornets fans. And I know I'm probably preaching to the converted here because it's not Hornets fans that find this way, but people who criticize need to understand, like, yes, there are imperfect moments, but you've got to work with what you've got, because there is no one more talented walking through the door tomorrow than LaMelo Ball to this franchise. Okay. Anything else on LaMelo Ball you want to get off your chest, or do you feel are people gonna be angry at us, Chase? I don't know. What do you think there? Do you think we tried to balance that well? It's a hard conversation to have because I know there's not many good things for Hornets fans right now, and LaMelo Ball is one of them. And someone pointing out some of the flaws and drawbacks, that's not popular. And I understand, but we have to be more mature than this. Like, we are here for analysis. We are not just here to, I'm not going to say what I was going to say. We're not just homers, right? We're here to analyze the game.
People might, be a little bit turned off by criticizing basically the lone bright spot on the team right now. But the way that I look at it is, LaMelo's the best player on the team. He is like the cornerstone of the franchise, one of the best players in the league at his position, already made an all-star team, however many 30-point games this year. Like, if you want to be praised in that way as the best player on the team, and when things go well, you also have to be criticized to an equal degree. Every single player that is like a top option for their team, or all-star, all-NBA, MVP level, whatever label you want to put on it, all of these players get criticized, dissected,
Yes.
analyzed down to the littlest, like, nitpicky little thing by not just the national media, their own fan base. Because, like, nobody wants LaMelo Ball to be a number one option more than Hornets fans, or like Hornets media, or Hornets analysts. Yeah. Anybody that watches this team game in and game out wants him to be as good as he possibly can be. I'm sure he does as well for himself. But obviously he's 23. He's not there yet. And until he gets there, that's what you have to do, is just point out and analyze the things that are, negatives or slightly below average or what have you, or just shortcomings that he has, and just wait to see if he improves on them. So far, he has improved on the high majority of them. Like, there's very few things that he hasn't improved on since he got to the league. But these types of things, like winning plays and, affecting the game, impacting winning, that is just like that's like the last step. And he hasn't gotten there yet, but until we see like maybe a little bit of roster change, or maybe just more development from him as he matures and gets older, then we'll see. But for now, like, I think it's more than fair to point out that these types of shortcomings.
Yeah. Okay. Before we move on to the next section, I want to tell you that this podcast is brought to you by allhornets.com, a credentialed Charlotte Hornets outlet powered by Sports Illustrated. Allhornets.com's aim is to bring you 360-degree coverage on all things Charlotte Hornets. From breaking news, rumors, game recaps, fan Q&As, in-depth analysis, allhornets.com covers it all, and nobody does it better. And make sure you check out the All Hornets podcast store. You can get some logo t-shirts. You can get some t-shirts from our quotable collection. The link will be in the show notes for this podcast episode, so you can go and check out some of our t-shirt designs there. Great way to support the podcast and show that you are the hardest of hardcore Hornets fans. Okay, next up, Chase, I challenge you, and I've done the same thing, to come out with who is in our core of the Charlotte Hornets. And there are no limits to how many there are. It was just an open question right there. Who is in the core of the Charlotte Hornets? Now we've seen 12 games. We've some seen Miles Bridges return. I touched on that in a solo podcast after his first game back, which is why we've not touched on it in detail tonight. Chase, give me your core. Just give me your full core. I'm intrigued to see how many people are there.
All right. So the way that I approach this too is, so this is like, we're doing this exercise kind of in the event that the Hornets moved on from the players that were not a part of this core, right? As you know, the team is not going to be, as we can tell from right now, the team is not going to be overly successful this year.
Well, there's going to be a new GM, right? Let's just say how it is.
Yeah.
There's going to be a new GM, probably going to be a new coach, and that new GM will be making a decision this summer, right? Who is staying, and maybe not everyone moves in one summer because like a lot of us to turn over in one off season can be too much. But let's pretend right now it is NBA 2K, and you can just go, right, I want to keep these players, and everyone else I'm moving on. Who are those players that you are keeping from a basketball perspective?
So, for one, I think if you're considering what the core is going forward, I think there has to be a relatively small number, just because otherwise it's not necessarily a core. You're just kind of keeping the same team that you have and replacing a couple. Right, exactly. So that's why I was like, okay, so I feel like this inherently has to be like a small group of players. Otherwise, you're not really changing anything. So agree. The way I approached that was obviously LaMelo is locked in as the core piece. Other than that, the only players that I think are a part of the Hornets core right now are Brandon Miller and Mark Williams. I think everybody beyond that, and this has nothing to do with like how good I think individual players are. Everybody beyond that is either a player archetype fit that you can move and extract value from because it's not like an ideal thing to put alongside those three players in the core, or they're just a player that's good and has trade value. And if you're gonna, make some changes, you have to give something to get something. So you have to give away a valuable player that's talented or on a good contract or what have you to get another one and see if that new player fits better. The only guys I think don't qualify on that list are LaMelo, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams. Everybody else, Hayward, Rozier, PJ, Nick Richards, Bryce McGowan's, Nick Smith, young players that I like. They're all good and fine, and I like having them on the Hornets currently. But if you're going to make changes, I think these are the players that you're going to be able to extract value from and then put new pieces around LaMelo, Miller, and Mark, which I think is very nice positionally as well. You have a point guard, like an off-ball, secondary playmaking, shooting wing, and then a rim-running big. So I think that's a relatively easy way to fill in some pieces around that too. So that helps as well.
So I would agree. I have 4 names down and I have 3 of them in pen, and the 3 names that you added are in pen. That lineup is currently minus 2.9 points in terms of point differential when those 3 are on the floor together. Not a great thing when your core
by
are
league
a negative
standards,
point
not
differential.
Good.
No,
but the Hornets standards, that's got to be a pretty decent lineup for this year, though.
Maybe. Look, the other one to include here, again, I'm talking from a basketball perspective, is Miles Bridges, right? And I know he's a free agent this offseason, but in the first 2 games back, he has looked, I think, he's looked to perform at a level probably better than I thought I was expecting. And as long as the team want to bring him back, and as long as the new GM do, I imagine, just from what I've seen so far, and obviously we know it's very early, that he would be part of that core as well. So I've got like 3 in pen, which are the 3 that you said, and like Miles Bridges written down in pencil here, depending, because he's an unrestricted free agent. If he doesn't want to be part of this project, he could just say, it doesn't matter what you want to pay me, I want to go elsewhere. That could happen tomorrow. So it's hard to kind of think, put him down in pen. But I would agree with you. And with that said, then you have, let's put in Brandon Miller, Mark Williams, LaMelo Ball starters for the next 3 years minimum. That then leaves you 2 positions to fill out in the starting unit currently, and those guys are all young and they're gonna get better. What 2 positions are you trying to fill around those guys? Like, what traits are you looking at that you think this team needs? And we know like backup point guard might be an issue. We're talking about the starting unit here, because the Charlotte Hornets starting unit currently is not good either. In fact, some of their bench units have been better. What are some of the traits you were looking for to add to that core?
So I've said this a couple times, but it's still the case for me. The most interesting thing about this season is going to be finding out whether Brandon Miller is able to play the 2 and defend the 2 long term. Right now, I think that actually looks pretty solid. Yeah. So you kind of have an interchangeable like 2 and 3 spot right there, which again, like, this is very valuable to have like this type of versatility and like positional allotment like in your starting lineup, and have players that are versatile, can defend their own position, and can score and create at a high level. Like, I think you could put like not necessarily this player, but like a RJ Barrett type, like traditional 2-guard next between LaMelo and Miller. Or I think you could put like maybe like a jumbo like 3 like maybe like Mikal Bridges or something like that. That is like a more of a third tertiary scorer and like a really good defender for the position as well. I think you could do either of those like archetypes and go down either road. A 4, I think, like PJ, but just probably not PJ himself, just given that the team has had him on it for so long and has not been good. Like, if you're going to make changes, you have to make changes.
PJ Washington is right now.
Exactly.
Like,
and that's a good player. Like,
he's a perfectly fine player.
Yeah.
He is not someone who you probably want to be in your top 5 unless you've got Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving on your team. He is a solid NBA player.
Yeah.
He is not someone that you build your core around. Like, that's just, we know what it is now. He's too inconsistent from night to night. The shot seems to come and go. If there was a stat that measured inconsistency, PJ Washington over his career, I swear, would be at the top of it. He goes from looking 0 to 0 night in, night out. And then you look at the overall numbers and they look fine. But the emotional ride is such a different one. And if I'm being honest, I don't think it's going to be long from what I've seen so far until PJ Washington might be coming off the bench for Miles Bridges. I think that, especially with the coach under pressure, with the need to win games, I think that could be happening very soon, especially with since Miles has come back, PJ Washington has just been completely disappeared. And I don't think it'll be that for the rest of the year. I don't know if that's coincidence. It feels like a coincidence. I don't think PJ's just checked out because Miles back now. I think people will read into that too much. I think it's just a coincidence, but we've seen these like cold streaks and hot streaks. And at this point, I think you just can't count on that being part of it. So I agree with you. Can't be part of the core. I think for me, you've got shooting there with Miller and LaMelo Ball. You've got playmaking, I think, with both of those players as well. What you really don't have is, I think you need like defense, toughness. And I think there's an opportunity, what you talked about. If you play Miller at the 2, that means your starting backcourt is 6'8" and 6'9". There is potential here to have like a team of 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" players who can basically just switch across. Like, you can say, well, they've got that now. PJ Washington is like 6'7". Miles Bridges is 6'6". They are not big for their position, size-wise, or long, particularly. They have an opportunity to actually get like a really jumbo. Like, they are all plus for their position size-wise. Mark Williams too. You could get some really interesting pieces, and that becomes your identity as like a super long, tall, wingspan team. But you need size, you need toughness, defensive instincts, and you need someone who can shoot. I don't think you need like a bunch more playmaking or shot creation. I think we need leadership, toughness, floor spacing, and defensive instincts. And like, for me, that is the absolute priority that you need to add to this team. That's why I talk about Harrison Barnes in the offseason so much, because he is like personified, not sexy name, but personified what I think that type of player needs to be added to this team. And I think they need to find it by trade, in the draft. I don't care how they find it, but that is the type of player that this team needs to add, because I don't think Melo Ball and Brandon Miller are never going to be that type of players. And you look at any good teams, they've got those tough motherfuckers on the team.
James, I was literally waiting for you to stop talking, because I was going to say the one thing this team lacks is a motherfucker right now. Yep. They have nobody that you look at them and say, that motherfucker is going to stop that guy when they come down the court, because
he's going to make my night miserable.
Run. They have 0 players on the team that give you that impression right now, and that is the core problem right here. With this,
so easy to play against. It's a night
so
off.
Easy.
Like,
so
you go into Charlotte and you know you're not going to get pushed around. You're not really going to get challenged. If they shoot the ball well, you might lose. Right?
Nobody talks shit. They argue with the refs the whole game. They're confused on offense and defense. It's just.
Why did you
see those balloons?
Yeah, I saw balloons came up. For those on the stream, Chase just had balloons come up on the stream, and we have no idea why.
Maybe it's my birthday or something. It's about 6 months too early, but we'll take it. But like we were saying, they just have nobody that imposes their will on like the most physical player on this team, or really the only like physical, tough, like aggressive player on the team is Nick Richards. And I like Nick, but he is incapable of creating shots for himself. He's a terrible playmaker. He makes mistakes on defense. He's just like a rim running, role playing backup center. That player being your best enforcer or like most physical guy is just going to get you nowhere. Like the players at the top of your roster have to be like, they have to have that dog in them, as the kids say. I don't think anybody on this roster really does. Maybe I think Terry Rozier does, but Terry is not like that type of player. Like he's like a
play
third,
with that physicality. Like
right. He's 6'1". Like he can be as physical as he wants, and he is sometimes defensively, and you can tell that he's playing hard, but he's 6'1". Like you just need more out of your wings and your bigger guards and your bigs themselves. Like there's just no toughness. Like
you need
really anywhere on the roster right now.
Your PJ Tucker, your Herb Jones, your Marcus Smart.
Somebody that's going to piss the other team off. Like
Gary
they have
Payton,
nobody that does that.
Yeah, you need these stuff like Aaron Gordon for the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah.
We're talking like about Kevin Looney does it for obviously Draymond, like probably maybe a little bit too much with that one. But you know Isaac Okoro with the Cavs, you can criticize his offensive game as much as you want, but they need guys that they go, oh shit, I have to go against him tonight. And people who are going to push people around, you know, Steven Adams and the different type of plays at the big position. And like Mark Williams is great. He is not like, oh God, I got to go up against him tonight. And the Charlotte just don't have that throughout their starting unit. And both Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball are like, one of the first things on the scouting report will probably be like, don't really seek out contact on either end. Like they're not physical, tough contact players. And you need to surround them with some guys who do that. So I don't know how they do it because those guys don't grow on trees who can also shoot, right? Because that's the other thing. This team, when you're playing Mark Williams at center, he's not going to shoot the ball. You need to have 4 people who can shoot around him. You know, this is the modern NBA right now. You can't start having other non-shooters around. You need to have people who can spread the floor for LaMelo Ball, who can spread the floor for Brandon Miller around Mark Williams. They don't grow in trees, but there's absolutely what this team needs to find a way to add.
You're right. They don't grow on trees. It is hard to find players like that. And especially for a small market team like the Hornets, you're almost certainly not signing a player like that. If you trade for them, you're probably going to have to give up quite a bit. And if you draft them, you got to develop them. I think that they have drafted one player that can do that in Brandon Miller. I think he is that guy. He seems like he is going to be, when he's older and gets more used to playing in the league and this pace and physicality of it, I think he will be one of those guys that you can rely on to be dependable and aggressive and play smart and tough every night. But the other thing is that if you're not going to draft another one, which ideally you're not picking high enough in the draft to do something like that very often down the road, you're going to have to trade for one. The Hornets have really never done that, like given up a ton of picks or assets and whatever in a big like win now trade, as if you'd want to call it that, for a player that could fill that role. Maybe now is the time to do that and really shake things up here. I don't know, but it kind of seems like that might be down the line here.
Look, OG Anunoby is the name that's been on the trade market forever. He would be a perfect fit. A guy who can defend, he can shoot. He would be a perfect fit. The price for him is going to be really high. And the Charlotte Hornets don't have a lot to trade. They're not. I didn't see them putting multiple future first round picks. And judging by this roster right now, they shouldn't, because this could be a team maybe in the running for Cooper Flagg in 2025. You just don't know at this point, right? Maine's Cooper Flagg. I know you're very excited.
Maine's very own.
So he's one. Like Andrew Wiggins is another guy who came across he's with Golden State right now, had a really down start to the season. If you just want to go full reclamation project, I mean, I'll always remember the finals that he had that year against Boston, where he was probably the biggest key player for his rebounding and defense in that series. But that's the kind of thing this team needs to add to their core somehow, because just a little bit soft at the minute. And I also don't think there's that big leadership aspect at the minute. Like LaMelo Ball, it's just not necessarily in his DNA to be like the traditional leader that we see kind of as a leader of men in the NBA. That's just not, it doesn't seem it's in his personality right now. I don't think it's in Mark's either. And this isn't saying that any of these guys are bad guys, but not everyone can be alpha dog, like have that mentality. And actually, having too many of those guys doesn't work because then they
Exactly. Yeah.
clash. But you need to have emotional leader of the team. And right now, that's Terry Rozier. And Terry Rozier hasn't been playing because of injury. And I just don't think Terry Rozier is quite there on the defensive end to be that.
So, James, I got an acronym to throw at you here. I got to admit, I copied this directly from the New York Giants, but I want you to tell me how many players on the roster fit all three words that are the letters in this acronym. It's SMART, STD, and get your mind out of the gutter here. There's no innuendos. Smart, tough, dependable. How many players on the roster fit all three of those words right now? I think one.
I'd say Terry Rozier.
Okay.
I would say he's tough in his own way. He's resilient. So I'd say Terry Rozier. What were the words again?
Smart, tough, dependable. Terry Rozier was my one.
Leaky Black?
Honestly, you might be onto something with that. He played 5 years in college and like barely missed games, so you actually might be onto something.
Look,
with that.
yeah. I'd say yeah, one.
My one was Terry as well. Brandon Miller, I think, could get there. He's played like what?
Yeah, it's really early for him. Like, it's not fair for us to put that expectation on the rookie to come in and do that in year one.
Right,
like that is just not normal. So I don't even expect that from anyone, right? Even Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant weren't doing that in year one. Okay, it takes time to build that. But yeah, I'd say one. And I think at times when this roster's been getting built, we look at skill and we look at what players can do with the ball and without the ball. And actually, you start looking around the NBA, there's a lot of players you can't do as much stuff as the Hornets. Like James Bouknight's a perfect example of this. You look at James Bouknight and you go, oh, but then you actually look at the impact and it doesn't land. And I think the Charlotte Hornets have quite a few players who are a little bit like that. That you look at them on the best nights and you go, oh, this guy could be a third, fourth best player on a playoff team. But then like they're just too inconsistent. Like you say, they're not dependable, and they don't bring that toughness every day to be consistent. Because you can play badly, but if you're tough, then like you can impact the game still.
You always have something to fall back on.
This team require to make shots to look good and to play well and to perform. They don't have that resilience. Like when they're down, they don't have resilience to fight. It's not in the DNA of some of the players in this team. And that's why they need to add it, Chase. It's a matter of certainty.
I completely agree. I think we were fully in sync on this one. There's plenty of good things and good players littered throughout this roster, and positive moments that have happened over the last couple of years with basically everybody that you'd point at. You can pick out the positive moments and reasons for optimism, but it's just at the point now where I thought they'd be good this year. Like, I'm probably going to be wrong about that, but now that they're not, like, it's time to just usher in some sort of change here, because you can't just keep treading water at however many games below 500 and think it's going to turn around with the same group.
The key thing for everyone to look out for is the unit of LaMelo, Mark, Brandon Miller, and Miles Bridges. So far, it's played 20 possessions, which is nothing, right? Miles been back for 2 games. That is the unit to look for the rest of the year. If we get to the end of this year and that unit is not plus like at least 3 or 4, then there are serious issues, because that is the core. Or if you can take Miles Bridges out, look at the 3. Your core players, when they're on the floor together, need to be better than like other teams. They need to be a net positive. Otherwise, you are building around like net -3. And that is just the way it's going to be. So that's the lineup to keep an eye out for going forward. But when we bring back the draft show for next year, that's something we're going to be focusing on. Like, absolutely finding those guys that fit those areas. I've already had my eyes open to try and keep an eye out. So, yeah.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was watching a bunch of college basketball today. I was going to say the draft show is coming around, not soon, but might be a little sooner than we'd imagined. Just much like last year, we'll be shifting into draft mode potentially sooner than Hornets fans had wanted to. But yeah, I mean, I think they're 6th on Tankathon right now. So seems like we're already back into the weeds.
Well, look, it's still early in the season. The Hornets have not been healthy. They've still not played probably their number one choice lineup at all yet through the season between injuries and suspensions. Take Cody Martin and Frank Ntilikina out of it, but Terry Rozier and Miles Bridges have not been on the court together yet. So there's still a world here where they're able to put it together. But the problem is at the minute, I just have a feeling they're going to be so disconnected from the playoff race by the time it happens. Like, you might just have guys already and knowing that there's new ownership in town, how things are looking, that it falls apart before it's even had a chance to get going. And that's what I fear might happen, but it might not. Like, the guys might stick with it. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, that I think we can be certain of. Steve Clifford and the players on this team are not going to actively tank. We saw that last year. They're going to play.
Steve Clifford might
hard.
not be here.
That much is probably true.
This team needs to look more organized, right? For Steve Clifford to be here, because it's one thing not winning with this team, but I've already talked about my coaching concerns on the previous episodes, and they still remain. This does not look a well-coached team right now, and you can't afford to do that when your contract expires and there's new owners in town. So,
nope, that is a bad recipe.
It is. Okay, Chase, we ran a little bit long today, but we went deep on some discussions there. Hopefully you enjoyed listening. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Let us know if you enjoyed the show. Subscribe to us on YouTube. If you want to watch on YouTube now, you can catch those video clips. They'll be on the YouTube stream. But we will catch you next time.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good one.